Daily Dose of Danny Jane. It is Wednesday, 12:40. I'm so late today, I'm sorry. There's been a lot going on. To speak about anything surface, like I swam 30 laps this morning. I just joined a 30 minutes for 30 days exercise thing and I'm on pace. Day 3, I'm still doing my shit. To talk about the fact that I decided to wear a jumpsuit today so that I wouldn't overeat because it's so hard to take off to go to the bathroom. You following me? Yeah, these are surface, silly things. It's crazy to talk about that kind of stuff when you have situations going on in our country that are so important and so stress-inducing and so upsetting. So I'm not going to talk about any of those silly surface things. I'm going to talk about deep stuff. I'm going to talk about white privilege, and one of the best editorial examples of this I saw on Instagram this morning at Allison Holker Boss. Allison, Allison, Holker, Holker, Boss, Boss. She did a TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but sometimes people share their TikToks on different forms, and she put this on Instagram. Her husband is Twitch. I don't know if you guys know Twitch, but I love Twitch. And so she's white, he's black. They have mixed children. They did the put a finger down thing on TikTok this morning to describe white privilege, and it was really powerful. So I encourage you to listen to that, watch it. At Allison Holker Boss, all one word, how they do on TikTok or on Instagram or whatever. I don't know. It's on TikTok, it's also on Instagram. Look it up. Try to take a look at it. It's a real illustrative example of what white privilege is. And some of the things that she mentioned, I've seen them, I've experienced them, and maybe in a certain time of my life, I may have behaved that way, but I don't behave that way anymore. And that's what we hope for everyone, that you gain a realization about what the reality is for Black Americans, and you change your behavior. So the protests are still going on, and they've gotten less, I don't want to say violent, because I don't believe that the protesters are the ones that are committing most of the violence. I think there's these fringe people or people who see this opportunity and they use the protesters as a shield while they go and do the looting and stuff. Or I think there are some people that actually despise Black people, and they go under the cover of this protest, because it's a big group of people, and damage property so that it gets blamed on the protesters. The problem with that chain of thought is that there's plenty of white people in this protest walking arm in arm with our Black Americans protesting the injustices. So there's a lot being said about things that you should read, things that you should discover if you want to go deeper into what it really means to be anti-racist. Not just against racism, but actually anti-racist and live that life. There was an article written by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he said a quote that I copied, which is, "Racism is like dust in the air. It's invisible, even if you're choking on it, until you let the sun in. Then you see it's everywhere." And everyone knows that example, like you have been in a room somewhere and like you open the shades and you see the little particles of dust everywhere. Well, that's what racism is. It's everywhere. And maybe you don't see it because your room's you don't have a lot of sun shining in, or your vision is like this and you don't really broaden yourself, but it's everywhere. And how you get rid of it, the first way you get rid of it is you freaking acknowledge that it's there. You have to acknowledge that it's there. It's institutional racism. It's in education. Teachers know this. It's in the justice system. Everybody who's ever seen anyone in a trial or committed of a crime know this. And it's also in the job market. There was something about unemployment, in this time when people are getting unemployment because they're out of jobs and stuff. And it was a high number, and I don't want to misquote it, but I'm just going to say, let's say it's 40%. 40% of young black men in primarily black communities are out of work, unemployed. Well, a lot of them have prison records. Now, whether they deserve to go to prison or not is irrelevant, but when you have a prison record, it's hard to get a job. So they're not just lazy motherfuckers on the street who could work if they wanted to. Some of them cannot actually get jobs. So they're doing what they can to make money, whether that's, joining a gang or whatever's available to them. And sometimes it's just, it smells if you're white. It's like, oh my God, that's, get out of that. Change your life. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. They can't. They're locked in a system of racism, systemic racism. So I also saw that the Minnesota officers, all 4 of them have now been arrested. At the beginning of the protest, they said, that the big part of the protest was, only the one with the knee on the neck. That was the only officer that was arrested and charged with anything. Now the other 3 who stood by and did nothing, those who had the power to stop it, those who should have involved themselves in it, stopped it, pushed him off, whatever, taking care of George Floyd, those 3 have also been arrested. I want to say this now, and I'll probably say it again towards the end of my daily dose, but your biggest power as a protester lies in your ability to vote. You need to vote. If all these people marching in the street could assure that they're registered to vote, go register to vote, protest, and then march right to the headquarters and register yourself to vote and vote in this next election that's coming up in November. It's June, July, August, September, October, November, 5 short months away. If you vote your conscience, we can get rid of that racist, tyrannical, motherfucking piece of shit in the White House. He can fucking go. And there won't be a place for him to go where he won't be despised for what he's done. And the little incendiary drips of hatred that he's dropped all along a path that leads right to his fucking front door. We need to get him out. So I hope all these people that are protesting right now, that they use their biggest power, which is the power to vote. And I know that there are places where there's voter suppression and they're purging people from the registrations and they're trying to make sure that black people don't vote. You need to protest that. You need to fight that. You need to vote, vote, vote. In November, vote. I wanted to talk a little bit, just a little bit, about the Amber Geiger trial because, I saw Trevor Noah did something on The Daily Show and I just watched it. And first of all, he's so brilliant. I just love him so much. And he really has his pulse, his finger on the pulse of what's going on. He's, interracial human being, and he can really talk about all sides of this issue. Although there aren't sides, there's one side. You're either racist or you're not, period. There is no middle ground. But so Amber Geiger is the woman who came home from work and thought she was in her own apartment. She walked into the wrong apartment, the apartment of Botham Jean, or Botham Jean, I don't know how they say his last name. It's spelled Jean, Botham Jean, let's say. Walked into his apartment and thought he was an intruder in her apartment. She shot him, killed him. She's white, he's black, went to trial. She was convicted of murder. She got 10 years in prison. When she was at her sentencing, Botham Jean's younger brother got to make a statement, and he asked if he could hug her. He forgave her. Now, that is a good man. That is a level of forgiveness and empathy and compassion that most people don't have. And certainly they don't have it for someone who just killed their brother. And Trevor Noah went on to talk about how, racism, institutional racism exists so heavily in our justice system. And, there's black men in prison right now for minor offenses that a white person would walk away from, maybe not even be charged, let alone arrested, convicted, and imprisoned. And that's the thing that needs to happen when we're trying to get rid of this systemic racism, this institutional racism. In the justice system, there has to be the same level of compassion and empathy for black people convicted of crimes or charged with crimes as we have for white people. Just changing that alone, just seeing them as a human being instead of a black guy who, this is what they do. They commit crimes, they go to jail. That's just who they are. That's their race. And that is a train of thought. That is part of this institutional racism. And I'm sure you notice that when a black person is charged with a crime or something happens to them, they get arrested, and maybe the arrest makes the news because potentially, #always, they're roughed up by the police officers that are arresting them. You always hear their backstory. Well, 10 years ago, they were convicted of assault. 5 years ago, they were pulled over and they had marijuana in their car. Okay, so now that you're roughing him up, getting him in a chokehold, holding him down to the ground, calling him in every name in the book, kicking him, dragging him off to jail, sending him to Rikers before he gets a bail hearing, that's because of all these things he did before? Or is that because he made an illegal lane change? Do you know what I mean? Like, you don't get to justify your behavior based on the shit the person did in their past. We don't know anything about Amber Geiger. What the fuck did she do? Maybe she's a piece of shit. We don't know that, and we don't care because she's white. It's just a fact. And I think once people start telling the truth, first tell the truth to yourself, and then listen to news and watch news and listen and read newspapers and read articles with the mindset that it's a human being. It's not a black human being or a white human being. It's just a human being. And what they did 10 years ago is irrelevant to what's happening today. It usually is irrelevant. I mean, I once cheated on my boyfriend. Fully fucking cheated on him and lied to his fucking face. Should that come up if I got a divorce? Does that speak to my character? No, I was fucking 20. It doesn't speak to my character at all. I changed, I evolved over time. People do that. People smoke pot in high school, but they're not stoners today. Do you know what I mean? People did drugs, dropped acid, did cocaine, but they're not cokeheads right now. They're mothers and fathers and gainfully employed and businessmen. So you can't hold everyone's past against them, and you can't use it as like levels of a ladder. And then when you get to the top and that person gets pulled over for their blinker being off, you don't say, well, we got 10 rungs on this ladder and the 9 below the one I'm on, they all count. Do you know what I mean? And I might even be saying that wrong, but you guys are getting my message. It's unfair. There is no empathy. There is no compassion at the same level for black Americans as there is for white Americans. It's just a fact. I don't care if that doesn't sit well in your stomach. I don't care if you say you're sick of hearing it. They don't have any, just get up, work hard, earn a living, you'll be fine. There aren't the same advantages for black people as there are for white people. If you think that exists, you're living in a fucking dream world. It doesn't exist. There is so much inequity in this world for Black people and people of color that to deny that makes you stupid. You're an idiot. It's not just that you're willfully stupid, because there's enough information out there to prove that what I'm saying is true. Racism is everywhere. And if you're Black, you do not have the same advantages as white people, period. End of story. And sometimes it's irritating to white people, and sometimes it seems unfair to white people, but it's always irritating to Black people, and it's always unfair to Black people. There's never a day where it's not unfair. Let's go back over the quote. Racism is like dust in the air. It's invisible even if you're choking on it. Until you let the sun in, then you see it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I don't have answers. I don't have solutions, but I know one thing. If I'm going to talk the talk, I'm going to walk the walk, and I am going to do my best to be educated and to speak with compassion and empathy towards every human being, no matter what the color of their skin. Go look at Allison Holker Boss. Go look at her TikTok, the finger down thing. Put a finger down if you've done this. Put a finger down if you've done that. I remember my sister telling me that, as a mother of a biracial son, she had to explain to him, this is how you behave when you get pulled over. This is how you behave if the cops come. And I always think back to Andy Lopez, who was like a young Hispanic boy that lived here in my town, and he was on his way to his friend's house walking across an empty field, and he had one of those airsoft rifles that looks like a AK, and he's walking across the field, and the cops see him, and it looks like a young kid. I mean, he had a hoodie on and stuff, so they couldn't really guess his age. It looked like a person carrying what looked like an AK. So they pulled over, and they say to him, put your weapon down. Stop, put your weapon down. And this is a kid, I think he was 14. He turned towards them holding the gun. And they saw that as a threat, and they shot him and they killed him. It was horrible. It was horrible. This community was devastated over that. And I'm devastated over that too. But there's a part of me that says, why didn't his mom tell him how to behave when a cop or anyone in law enforcement says, stop, put your weapon down? He knew it was a toy, but they didn't know it was a toy. They told him to stop and put his weapon down. You know what he should have done? Stop and put his weapon down. And they couldn't tell from across the way what color his skin was. He had his hood up, like I said. And, he's 14, and I've seen some 14-year-old boys that look like 21-year-old men, and I've seen the 14-year-old boys that look like 7-year-olds. But from the distance that they were, which was far enough to see it, but not close enough to see him exactly. But why? Why do moms have to tell their sons this, and daughters? That's the world we've created for this generation. And the Andy Lopez story is like a little caveat that's in the minds of all the people in my town. And it's even some of these protesters, they marched for him yesterday. He was part of their protest. So, yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy, heavy, heavy. And there's just a different set of rules for Black people than there's for white people. It's a fact. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. And I won't apologize for the fact that I know it's true. I just won't. So there's your daily dose of Danny for what it's worth. It's so not lighthearted, but I have actual pain in my heart, like a real physical pain over what's going on in our country right now. It hurts me deeply. And I just hope that there can be some healing and that it can happen soon, and that all of these people that are protesting injustice and inequity put that protest to a vote in November. We need your help. We've got to get rid of the person in charge because he is the devil. Okay.